Ha. What's the tea with ACP?
Hello.
Hello. Elliot. Hi.
Hi.
Get in here. Hello, everyone.
I'm so excited for today.
Me too. Hello, world.
Yes.
I am Michael Lewis. I'm the artistic director of Oral Compass Projects. I'm Cody. Hey, I am Cody Ray Cahoe, secretary for Oral Compass Projects and baritone and performer.
Hi. Sorry, I don't know why my audio is doubling up, but now we're on track. There we go. Hey, I'm
Nice.
Elliot. I hope you enjoy this conversation today. It's going to be fabulous.
So we have 2 guests today and 3 teas. A nice little tea blend for you all. Our first guest is Pascale Florestal. And actually both of our guests I know from my undergrad. We all went to school together at the same time at Ithaca College. And Pascale is a director, educator, dramaturge, and collaborator based in Boston, Massachusetts. Her recent directing credits include Back the Night by Melinda Lopez at Boston College, We Are Proud to Present by Jackie Sibblies Drury at Brandeis University, and Code Listen by Shaw Pong Liu at the Millennium stage of the John F. Kennedy Performing Arts Center. Pascale has directed several staged readings of new plays by Michael Hisamoto, Marcus Gardley, Obehi Janice, Phaedra Michelle Scott, Lynne Brandon, Erin Lerch, and Greg Lamb. As an assistant to the director, she has worked with Kimberly Senior, Liesl Tommy, Billy Porter, Paul Daigneault and M. Bevin O'Gara. I probably butchered those, I'm sorry. Pascale is also a dramaturg, recently working on Passover by Aniontte Nwandu with SpeakEasy Stage, co-produced with the Front Porch Arts Collective. She also serves as the education director for Front Porch Arts Collective, where she created the Summer Reading Series and the Young Critics Program, an educational program that strives to foster and incubate the next generation of arts critics. Yes. She currently works as the Arts Emergency Preparedness Coordinator with the City of Boston's Mayor's Office of Arts and Culture.
Fierce.
Hey. Yes.
Fierce.
Welcome,
Yes.
Pascale. Thank you for joining us. Hello.
Hello.
Hey.
Hi, so great to be here.
Thank you so much for joining
It's great to have you.
Of course.
And for our next guest.
It's so great to be here. I cannot wait for the tea.
You and me both. I appreciate everyone's patience as we deal with this lag. Yes.
It's a little.
Sorry. Will Shishmanian, our next guest, is a musical theater composer / lyricist and singer-songwriter based in Queens, New York. He wrote music and lyrics for Addie and Dahlia, a fairy tale musical, which recently had a concert production sponsored by Planned Parenthood's Out for Health program in January 2019 at the Secret Theater in New York City, and was originally performed in 2012 at Ithaca College, and the Community School of Music and Arts in Ithaca, New York. He was also one of the composers for Camp Morningwood, which premiered off-Broadway at Playwrights Horizons in 2019. Shishmanian has had selections of his work featured at Joe's Pub at the 2019 Trans Day of Visibility Cabaret, on Oral Compass Projects LGBTQ Showcase at Opera America in 2019, and at Trans Voices Cabaret at the Duplex. Shishmanian has also released 2 EPs of his solo music and a full-length album, Steps, under the artist name Will Shish. He is currently writing a musical about a transgender man finding his place in a rural community and collaborating on a musical adaptation of Christopher Marlowe's Edward II with Anessa Marie and is working on 2 solo EPs. He also performs and records as a freelance guitarist, bassist, and producer. He graduated with a Bachelor's of Music and Composition from Ithaca College. Woo! Will Shishmanian, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Of course, thanks for joining us.
Yes, honey. They are busy, 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 busy. Okay.
Uh-huh.
They're making changes happen in the world.
Attempting.
So today we have a nice floral blend of herbal teas for you. We're going to talk a little creativity. We're going to talk a little community, and we're also going to talk honesty. And I think we'll start with creativity. So Elliot, if you want to give us a definition.
Yes. So here's the definition of, we're starting with creativity.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I had it up, child. Here we go. All right. So the Merriam-Webster definition is the ability to create and the quality of being creative. Pretty simple definition, but you know, that is what creativity is in a way. It starts with the simplest idea and blossoms into something great.
I think there's like, it's really easy to get really tangled up in this idea of creativity, that it's this thing that's so far away from like a normal person's ability. But anyone who has an idea and creates some sort of physical change around them, or emotional change, any sort of change, that is a creative process. Like my mom switched careers at the age of 41, I want to say. Pascale.
No.
Goodbye.
It's okay. I think she'll be back.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll
So
be waiting.
You were saying your mom switched careers.
Yeah, my mom switched careers from being a waitress and working in the food industry for most of my life. And then realized that wasn't working for her anymore. And now she is an addiction and drug counselor near Atlanta. And that took creativity. She had to figure out that she was not happy in the food industry and figure out what she was happy about, and then created all of these opportunities for herself to get an education.
Right.
So I'm always going to shout out to my mom, because that's just so impressive to me that she made that huge change.
Hey, Mama.
Yes. Are you watching? But I don't know. We're all artists here, so it's something that this is all like, this is our bread and butter. We think about this stuff all the time. And I'm just wondering if your queer identity has informed your creativity, or how creativity has developed in you. And
yeah.
I think for me, it's helped shape, the stories I want to tell. She's back, yay!
Sorry, technical difficulties, but I'm back.
I guess a lot of my earlier work was just singer-songwriter stuff, which is a lot of, I stories, personal stories, which, they may be queer, they may be not. A lot of it is up to listener interpretation. And while I there's an important place for that in the music sphere, I was missing the clear narrative about, what are the voices that we're talking about here. And I know my first musical, Addie and Dahlia, I started writing before I transitioned. So at the time I identified as a lesbian, and I was like, we need more lesbians in musicals. So that was what birthed that first thing. And now both of the shows that I'm working on right now are either centered around LGBTQ identity, or if it's not about that, there are characters that exist in that sphere. So I think we have a lot of media that centers around cishet stories, and there's still a lot of room for different kinds of voices that we haven't really heard, especially in the musical theater world. So that's definitely informed the path that I feel I am currently on, and that I feel I have the most to give musically and creatively.
Yeah.
Yes, and all of the things that Will does is amazing, just so you know.
Thank you.
That's so nice. Pascale, what about you? How does your identity affect your creativity in your process?
I love this question. I think a lot of what Will said is true. I think we're in a time now where we are exploring more stories that are able to fit many different kinds of identities. And for me, I identify as a queer woman of color, and a lot of what I do goes to represent that community, or at least gives more space for those stories to be seen on stage. So a lot of the things that I do within my work, and especially as a director, is kind of go against the normalcy of casting. I try to make it as Black as possible and as queer as possible. And I think it's really by embracing those identities, more people are able to see themselves on stages and things that they may never have been seen before. And that representation is so important. And I think it's also not just on the stage, it's behind the stage too, whether that's as directors, music directors, stage managers. And, one of the things that I've been recently working on is critics. A lot of the critics in any artistic medium are mostly old white dudes, very old white dudes. And it's, I think we are seeing a renaissance of art happening right now, not only right now, but in the last few years. And it's important to have different perspectives also be the people talking about this art and giving their experience and how they connect with it. Because not everyone's able to connect with certain stories. So imagine what kinds of reviews we could have of musicals if there were more queer critics who could actually understand what these characters and what these writers are trying to put on stage. So it's really a part of my work to continuously have my identity in it so that other people can be seen as well.
Yeah,
That's so
I love that.
Oh,
I love that.
Thanks.
It's so important, like you were saying, to have voices on stage and off stage that identify the people who are literally performing the roles and tasks
Yep,
that
that's
are,
a good one.
expected of you in life. Like it's just important to showcase real life and the times that we also have now, and also stories from before. Because queer people have been around forever.
Yes,
So,
we're not new.
right. So I love that. I love both of your answers so much. So much.
To go along with that, I have I'm really interested in, Pascale, your work with developing young critics of art and music specifically, but they're taking in art is such a unique form of creativity, right? So someone has already put all of this creative work into producing this thing, and then it's the audience's job to feel what that is inside of them. So how does creativity play into viewing art?
Ooh, what a question. Oh my God. I think, I feel like there's so much, I think art is revolutionizing now. The way we consume art, even in that frame, especially in this pandemic that we're experiencing, people are really trying to figure out what are the different ways we can consume art and engage with it. And I think that creative aspect really that we have gives a lot of how we respond, how we engage with that art, and then how we bring it out into the different worlds, different people. And I think it's such an important aspect of the way we create art, and that form of engagement that we have with audiences. That's like kind of my favorite part of directing, is being able to have that engagement with the audience. How are we bringing this story forward? It's not just we're telling the story, what's the next step that comes after that? And I think that's also a part of that creative process. And as audience members, I think it's always up to the team to keep them as engaged as possible, no matter what kind of art engagement they're having, whether that's visual, music, theater, dance. There's so many ways that we can engage with our audiences. And I think audiences are always craving something new and different. So the more that we're able to respond to that and think outside of the box, the more creative we can even see, like, the way people respond to us, especially in this day and age of social media and people using Instagram and Twitter. Like, you couldn't have told me 10 years ago when I was in high school that that's how I would be promoting my work as an artist, because that's not just what we didn't have that yet. Like, I don't even think Instagram existed 10 years ago. So
Not
to
really.
even, right? Okay, just making sure. But to even think about it in that way and how we can use that creativity that not only audience are using, but we're using as artists, is really how we can continue the work to just explode in a whole way I don't think anyone has prepared for.
And I think I think an ideal audience is a creative, open-minded audience. I know with the show that I'm writing right now that centers around trans masculine identity, yes, that is the title character's background, but I'm trying to write it in a way in which people see themselves in characters regardless of the identity. And I think that people connecting two different kinds of characters allows them to be more creative with how they see the world. And hopefully that is how I hope theater can create social changes. So you want your audiences to have these open, creative minds and say, you know, that might not be my day to day, but this piece has helped me understand someone else's day to day in a way that I understand the world in a bigger way than I have before.
Yes.
And having experienced some of your art, Will, to me, it has felt like it could literally anyone could be saying those words, but not. It's tricky because it's so specifically coming from one perspective and your perspective, but it's like you are showing everyone how similar everyone's experience is, and so
that's supposed to be
check it out.
That's supposed to be the goal. I mean, and this is after years and years and years of lyric study and like crappy lyrics from, you know, the time I was 10 years old, to trying to find such specific word choice that once the hope is that once there's more information about the character, it will become very, very clear what's going on. But the song "Who Am I," which is probably what I'm assuming you're referring to, it isn't anybody's question. Who am I, and what are other people seeing when they see me, and what am I putting out into the world? And then that's kind of a thing that trans people often are thinking at a hyper level because of this concept of passing and validity. Many people may see you as more valid if you are cis passing, and this is a whole huge can of worms that have to be open. But if you hook people with that familiar feeling of wondering, how do people perceive me, that I'm trying to like take these little word choice things to get people to that point, to be set up to take more information in about trans people and different trans experiences soon.
Wow, that's such such a great thing, because I feel like a lot of times when it comes to queer voices or BIPOC voices, the material like has to surround that. And the point really is to show that we're all just normal people living in this world, and your identity shouldn't affect the way that people treat you or see you. It should just be a part of you, and that's a beautiful part of you. Right? So it seems like that's really coming through in both of your work.
That's our hope, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm glad you're getting it. Thank you.
Okay, it's working so far. Yes.
And Will, you're saying that like with the audiences that you have or that we have, like you would hope that they're open-minded and can receive these things. But how do you deal with audience members that maybe aren't so open-minded? I think you specifically deal with it in what we were just talking about, where you try to relate your experience to everyone and frame it in a way that they can hear it. But I don't know if either of you have any thoughts on that.
Most of my trolls are on the internet, so
that's all they can do.
I'm very lucky, for many reasons, but one is I haven't had a lot of in-person like audience members being like, that wasn't it for me. And I've been surprised sometimes by the, it'll be older white men who are like, keep going with this. I can't wait to see where it goes. That I'm like, I wasn't writing this for you, but I'm glad that you're hearing it. I get most of my critique from people who just search the trans hashtag and are like, this is not a thing, mental disorder, I'm hoping that the work is speaking to people who are open to it. And that's, we talk about this in various activist circles. Certain people are just tuned off intentionally all the way. And those people aren't really the people you're trying to reach, right? Like those are the people that you're hoping are going to open their minds, are the people that are already put themselves into the theater space to hear this information. So, but I also have this male passing privilege. So I think people are, when they see someone who is a trans person, but that also looks like what they expect a trans person or what they expect a man to look like, I think it doesn't challenge them as much. So that's part of the reason that I haven't had that pushback these are just my genetics and the fact that I've had access to hormones. So what I want to do is take that privilege and really make people start to open up their expectation of what a man or a woman or anyone should look like, because that's all something that can go out the window anyway.
Yep.
Constructs.
Yes, constructs. Break them. I've had, for me, it's very rare that I'll have pushback when it deals with my queerness. I think I live in Boston, so it's a little bit different. It's, the liberal fake, but who knows, whatever they want to be on their day time. I think I've experienced more pushback in terms of race. And I think it's always very specific, and it's normally the same kinds of people. When I did when I was the dramaturg for Passover with SpeakEasy, which is a play about police brutality, which I can't believe. Sometimes I just did that in January, and we are only in June, and it's still happening. But so the play, it's called Passover. It's about these two young Black men who are just waiting for the world to change for them. It's kind of a riff off of Waiting for Godot, and they're just waiting to get off this block and be able to be who they want to be. And they have encounters with this white man, and then they have an encounter with a police officer. And it just talks a lot about what happens to Black and brown bodies today. And the play says the N-word about maybe 200, 300 times. And the playwright, Antoinette, says in the, I think it's right before the stage directions of the show, that the N-word should only be said by the actors of color in the play, and nobody else should be saying it in the room, unless the director is of color. And so we had a post-show talk back, and it's always interesting during talkbacks to see people's reactions to plays that are unapologetically Black. And we had a audience member a white older man audience member who said to my face and to the director and my colleague, he said the N-word and said, I would never say that in front of a Black person. And I looked at him and was like, you're saying it right now to me and my colleague. And he just couldn't understand that it was wrong for him to say it in that moment. And then another white woman said it. And her preface was, I haven't seen the news in 25 years, but when I say the N-word, and it was just one of those moments where I don't understand how to help people. It's kind of like what Will said. There are certain people who come to see shows, and you can't control you can't tune out everybody. And certain people, they will tune us out. But I think the trickiness with regional theater sometimes is you have subscribers who are who are there from God knows how long. They've probably been subscribers of the theater for years. And so now that we're in this time where theater, I think, is really trying to break boundaries, really push the envelope, challenge people. It's something I've been seeing a lot happening in Boston theater, where shows are taking more risk, and the typical audiences don't know how to deal with it. Like, we got complaints that the title Passover was anti-Semitic. And I was just like, oh, I didn't know that you could only use the word Passover when you're speaking in the terms of the holiday, not that people use that word all the time. So it's interesting to see how people respond to shows, or to, primarily for me, theater, that speak to a demographic or speak to a specific experience and what they want out of it. So it's always, it's a whole thing to know how that all unfolds.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yeah.
It's still mind blowing and boggling that kind of stuff happens. I mean, it's not, but it is. But I experienced that with being a classical singer. Like, most of the people who are coming to my shows or our shows are of that demographic, and sometimes the feedback is really beautiful and like so touching and moving, and sometimes you're just like, well, thank you for your contribution, but it's not needed or necessary, you know?
Yeah.
Oh, I just don't know.
But we still have to do it, right? Like, we still have to keep doing it, and the work has to keep going forward. So that's like what I remind myself in those moments when I have to deal with an old white person coming up to me being like, but racism doesn't exist anymore. I'm like, did you watch the play that I just dramaturged? Were you there in the room? Okay, cool.
Well, I think that there's a little clip that we want to show from the normals. Is that
the regulars.
Correct? The regulars. Sorry, wrong thing.
It's all right.
The regulars. My bad. From the regulars. Can you tell us a little bit more about the regulars?
Yes. So it is a show that I'm working on. It's I'm calling it a folk rock musical or a folk operetta in a sense, because I'm trying to have it be predominantly sung through, but in this more rural feel. It's a story of a trans man who moves to a new town so that he can just live as a man unquestioned, which historically is what many trans men did. Even, I mean, like in the 1800s, before we had this language about trans identity, people who were assigned female at birth, who then lived as male, often would move to new places and just perform these masculine roles. And as long as you were performing that, right, and you were in a heterosexual pairing, people were like, he's a member of society or whatever. So and I think because of that, and I think because the nature of testosterone can make it easier for people, trans masculine people, to pass as a cis person, a lot of times you can be what we call stealth, or just not disclosing your trans status. So this main character's struggle is, does he disclose his trans status once he realizes kind of some of the toxic masculinity that he is experiencing in his peers for the first time, because there's a lyric in another song from the show, I'm a fly on the wall watching the world as it falls, where he's kind of realizing the things that men say to other men when there are no women present, and the deep misogyny, and often also homophobia and racism, and all the kinds of things that come out when you're in this group of just men, which, I mean, that's an experience that I had even as I was transitioning, seeing the way people would treat me differently, hearing the kinds of things people would say around me that they never would have said before. And it's kind of a unique experience to have lived in multiple genders and to be able to personally compare and contrast. And for me, I think is important for trans men to be calling this kind of stuff out. Like this is I see it as a stepping stone, and I know that there are people that have changed their behavior because of the conversations we've had. And I want to show a story in which someone has to make that decision between, well, do I just assimilate into this culture of kind of toxic masculinity, or do I put myself at risk, and do I risk being, you know, shunned from this group, and where then do I find my community? So it's a story about that. And I believe if playing the song "Who Am I" would be the opening song of the show, where we are introduced to this character, and just as he's moved to the new town that he has moved to. That's my synopsis.
Love it.
Oh, thank you, Will. Here we have it. Who am I?
Pieces that make me look the best. A stranger's eyes. Am I still learning, so it's hard to say. But this interview has gotta go my way. Time to improvise. Anyone see these sides of me? I always have to compartmentalize. Does everyone need to know the ways I've grown? If the change in me is something they despise. Am I just a man who's a little self-made? Or a daughter, but my consciousness forbade. I've compromised. These days, nothing is certain. Some places know you're safer if you're discreet. I weigh the risks that I'm taking, the choices I'm making to feel complete. Hardly knowing what it's safe to say. If I'm honest, there's a chance I'd stay. Or I could be denied. Even if I tried, I don't know if I can start over again. What's left to decide?
Oh my gosh. Got a little tear.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
So beautiful.
I love hearing when everybody else comes in. I'm like, chorus, chorus.
Oh, so that was my first time hearing that clip and hearing that song. And as I was listening to it, I started to get like a little emotional because I'm like, wow, I too can identify with these words. I'm not a trans person, but I still understand the feelings that are being portrayed through this music. And the way that it's written as well, just musically, is so kind of pure in a way. And you really can hear what is being said, and that I think kind of rings that it'll ring true with so many people. It's really beautiful. Really
Thank you.
beautiful.
That's why I wanted to put this one at the beginning, because I think the thing I've been juggling with is like, I want to get into very specific things about trans identity, but you're gonna still in 2020, as we know, there's still people that they're not gonna necessarily sign up to be like a trans musical. So trying to widen the potential listeners and not shut people out in the first song and be like, I don't get it. But I'm glad to hear that it is doing what it is intended to do.
Definitely, for sure. I felt it. So you're doing a good job. So
it's really beautiful, Will. And I just wanted to add, like at the end, the little do 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 do. I think we had talked about it. I was like, I don't know. Do you think we should leave this in for it because it's like excerpted out of the musical? But I mean, I love that we did it because it gives the audience and everyone just like time to like reflect on everything that they've just taken in, instead of just immediately being like, oh yeah, that was
right.
Great. They kind of can look inward. So
yeah, I'm glad we kept it.
Yeah.
So beautiful. So I know our next word is community. And something that is a big part of queer, Black, trans identity is fostering a sense of community and having spaces to be able to express ourselves authentically and wholeheartedly. And so I just want to give a definition of community. So now this one, she's more intense. Okay.
She better be.
She's more intense. So I'm going to give you, there's a 1, 2, and a 3. Okay. So the first definition of community is a unified body of individuals, such as the people with common interests living in a particular area, a group of people with common characteristics, a body of persons of common and especially professional interest scattered through a larger society, a body of persons or nations having a common history or common social, economical, or political interest, a group linked by a common policy, and an interacting population of variations. So that's the first one, right? So a lot of things in that first definition. The second is a social state or condition, joint ownership or participation, or common character, so a likeness of someone. And the third is society at large. So it seems that when we talk about the definition of community, there's kind of rings to each level, right? So maybe the first ring would be a unified body of individuals. The second being maybe a social state, like it says, or condition. And the third being just the society at large. And we can see these different communities throughout, kind of anything that you want, anything. You can make a community pretty much for whatever you feel like, as long as there's 2 or more people that also identify with you, right? So I want to know what type of things, I know that both of you are kind of working within your own community and trying to foster relationships. What are some things that maybe someone else could do to try, if they feel like they're not connected in their community? What's maybe something that someone could do to try to feel more connected? If you have any answers for that.
Oh, I love that. I think the first step is to just break outside of your comfort zone. Unfortunately, that's the scariest part. I've been living in Boston now. It's 2026 years. And I think it wasn't until like the last 3 years that I have felt like I have been able to have a community here in Boston that I can connect with, I can go to, I can create work with. And then I have like I have like a core group of people that I know I can be with. And it took a long time for me to be able to like feel good about that community. I think a lot of times it seems like it's an easy thing, but you want to be sure that the community that you surround yourself in lifts you up, makes you feel that you are valued, that you are heard, that you are seen. Like those are so important. So when you're looking at community, like when you look around the people you surround yourself, you should feel those ways. And if you don't, then how can you maneuver certain parts of it or find your way into another place that gives you those feelings? And I think that does take time, which as someone who is impatient is very annoying. But when you finally have that community that makes you feel like you have a family, it is totally worth it. I think when I first moved to Boston, I didn't even plan to stay here for a long time. I remember I told my wife, I was like, listen, I probably will be here for a year and then we'll move to New York City where all of our friends are. Yes, see, Will and Michael being two of them. And to now see that we've been able to make a community here in Boston has really made it worth a while to stay. And it's still nice that New York is only 4 hours away, thank God. But I think being able to break outside your comfort zone is like really the first step. And it's going to be hard and it's going to be very uncomfortable, but that uncomfortability gives you the opportunity to open yourself up to things you may not have been able to do before.
Love that. Love that. I kind of wanted to pose this question to Cody, Ray, and Michael as well. And Will, if you're open to share that as well, what kind of things would you suggest if you feel like someone is maybe looking for a sense of community or trying to find that? What are maybe some spaces that they might be able to find that or ideas on that?
Well, I think for me, like probably the two biggest communities that I surround myself with are musicians and then general LGBTQ hub. Mm-hmm. So that one is a little harder in our times of coronavirus, but historically LGBT bars have been a great place to meet people. And I've definitely met friends at bars, and some of them end up being longer term friends. And some of them are just, people that you can start to grow your own identity with and learn about other places you can go and just be out with other people. That is one, that's the whole part of the definition of community, more than two people. So you can't be by yourself. And then for music, it's like showing up at events and the network moves so quickly. There are gigs that I'll get that I'm referred to by someone that I worked for 2 years ago or something. Mm-hmm. And I think when you start working with different people and you learn, who you really gel with. I have now some of my best friends are people that I played on a gig with or something, and a lot of or took a class with. And that's another thing too, is like taking classes have to do with your interests or your identity or whatever you are looking to build community around. And like Pascale said, like breaking out of your comfort zone, and whether it be digitally or physically, putting yourself in these spaces and then using your judgment around who is someone that, again, like Pascale said, is going to bring out that best sense of self and your best you that you want to spend your time with.
I love that, digitally or physically. That's the great answer, especially for 2020. I mean, we have the access to be able to do that. So why not take advantage of it?
And I know trans people have been doing that for a long time. I know when I came out, like there had been a surge of like YouTube, Tumblr, especially trans voices coming out, because I didn't know any other trans people. I knew like a trans person, and that was it. But to try to find people who we could have these conversations about hormones, and now I still see it for sure. I think that's what is great about some of these hashtags is I do every once in a while I'll get a question from a stranger asking about what is it like transitioning vocally, what like people considering taking hormones and stuff. And luckily the internet has made it a lot easier to connect with people and find the answers and the people you're looking for.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Cody, Ray, Michael, any ideas?
Well, this is making me think of just heading into this summer. There a lot of summers in the past, you know, I've been like very career focused and like, okay, I'm gonna do this workshop, and then I'm gonna go do this workshop, and you know, all of those connections are sort of built in. And now, for the first time, I have not headed into the summer saying like, this is my personal time and it's only for me, and everyone else can like, goodbye. I know.
No, but that's real. It happens like very often, especially if you're doing like for me, young artist programs and things like that. It's like everyone gets cut off during the summer. All of my friends, family know they won't hear from me except for if it's on a holiday. Other than that, like I'm in that community. I'm in that focused space.
It's like it's almost a forced community. You're forced into this community, and I mean, you can make some really great long-term friends in those spaces, but you might also not.
Right.
There's an opportunity to be intentional about those connections. And so like being now in the pandemic, it's just making me think like, have I really been as thoughtful as I can be about connecting to people who feel similarly? Or have I just been resting on this progression of like, you need to do this and then this and then this, and then you'll be there.
Right.
But instead lead with like this.
Right.
I'm connecting to people that I want to learn from. Yeah.
I think also with what Will was saying, like if you are interested in something, if you have certain interests, look for events that are to that interest, and then you will automatically be in contact with people that have that same interest, and that's like a great way to build community. You already know you have this one thing in common. It also made me think about when you were asking the question, like people that only are in community with the people they work with. Like these are the only people they see. And if you're in a field or in a job that you don't really have your heart in or your passion in, then it's likely you'll be in contact with similar people like that, and that will feel less like a community than if you are connected with things that are truly meaningful to you and that you're passionate about, even if it doesn't make you the same kind of money that would.
Right.
I think following those things that you are passionate about and following those things that really spark something in you will lead you to your community.
Wow.
I love that. Love that.
Oh, such great answers. So I have another question. Now this take a second after I ask it, because it's a pretty a deep question. And there's a lot of things that surround it. So this is the question.
All right.
How do we create a more equitable space for queer, Black, Indigenous, people of color, directors, producers, and artists in a post-COVID landscape, which we know for most of us artists? I told you it's an intense question. But I know that for most artists right now, a lot of our gigs and things have been canceled. We're having to create our own opportunities and still be able to put our voices out here. And you know, a lot of things aren't necessarily going to be open back up until 2021, or at least until the end of 2020. So how can, and with the Black Lives Matter movement and protesting and kind of all of these things helping to reshape our mindset, our national mindset, our world mindset, I think there's room for change and for us as people who are traditionally marginalized to have space in these avenues. So, yeah, do you have any thoughts on that? I know it's a big question.
I think one thing is there's probably some classics that we can stop performing.
Yes.
That are taking up space everywhere.
Yep.
Like on Broadway, regional theater, community theater, like, and it is the two sides of it. Like when people need butts in seats, which is now that's pre-COVID, but what's going to sell tickets? What are subscribers, which we've already talked about what that base often looks like, is going to show up for, so we can keep this theater running because there's no funding. But people in our generation and of our mindset are not coming out to see these shows that are often dated, misogynist, racist shows, and are still being run by the same people. So unfortunately for those people, I think they need to step to the side or be pulling people up to have equal roles in both behind the stage and on stage. That's it.
I feel like this. I answer this question. No, I don't answer. I try to answer this question almost every day at my job, because I think everyone is trying to figure this out, which is exciting. Because I think we are in a time that people are like realizing, like, oh, theater's racist, art is racist. What? I didn't know that there were no Black composers at the Met Opera. But anyways, but I think what's been nice is that people are trying. I haven't seen anything happen that has made me excited yet, but people are reckoning with this. And for me, you know, as I look at other organizations, other countries, I think the one thing I always come back to is money. I think it's money. It's putting money into the right hands. I look at countries in cities like London where there is investment from the state, from the federal, that they put money into theater, they put money into the arts. And I think until there is a real investment in the arts, it will continue to be inequitable because the people with more money will continue to be at the front line. My hope is that those people who do have the money will realize that they need to give those money to people who don't look like them, who look like the people who are creating the art that we need to see, and keep expanding what those voices look like. And I think, just like Will said, we need to stop producing Shakespeare. No one's going to miss it. I bet you no one is going to miss it. And we need to produce more artists that aren't this, like, I'm sick of seeing Arthur Miller plays. We don't need to see his plays anymore. It's all fine. We all know how it ends. White man is angry. Probably he dies. That's it. And I think we're just done with that. We're in it. And especially now that we have to embrace the virtual technology that is going to take over the next year or two, let's be real, might be 2 years. That means we have to expand how we make that art and who we make that art for. And it also means that there's so many more people we can engage with, which is so exciting, because I think as a theater artist, and I can imagine for you all as musicians, we have such a finite time that we can create and perform. So so sometimes we can't get it to everyone that we want it to get to. So I'm excited that this opportunity of the pandemic can force people to realize that we need to create art that is more accessible on so many levels, not just for people to watch, but also for people to be a part of. So I think, again, money is the way that the world works. And I would love for people to invest more in the arts, because the artists are the ones who will be creative enough to rethink how we make this world work. So invest in it more. Put your money where your mouth is.
Exactly. Oh, great answers. Yeah, I knew it. I said, oh, they got it. They'll be able to.
Try it.
Awesome.
Pascale, would you want to talk a little bit more about this new role that you have? Something arts preparedness emergency.
It has changed twice. When I first got the job, I think it was arts preparedness emergency coordinator, I think, or like a responder. And now I'm the arts emergency preparedness coordinator. So I don't know if New York City has this, but in Boston, we have a sector of the mayor's office that is dedicated to arts and culture. And so they support as many arts and culture organizations and artists in the city of Boston. And right when the pandemic happened, this job posting came up. And I was lucky enough to get it right as every gig I had. I actually like planned to freelance in February and like quit my day job, was going to freelance, be a director, just directing, and then the pandemic happened. But I was lucky to find a job within 2 days of losing all my gigs. And so most of my work really is to support all of the arts and culture organizations in Boston during this time of the pandemic. So that normally looks like we have Friday meetings every Friday to update people on terms of our numbers, what's testing going on, like what kind of legislative is happening and being passed in the House so that we know as organizations what people can apply for. Or this was really big when we were talking about the PPP loans, the stimulus checks, unemployment. So a lot of my work is really supporting artists and arts and culture organizations during this time, because a lot of them are trying to figure out how we continue forward and where does that information come from. And as we're slowly moving into reopening, whatever that may be, a lot of organizations and artists are trying to figure out what does that mean for them. And so a lot of my work is finding research from different organizations around the country and the world and how they're reopening their different arts and cultural organizations. How are artists being affected? How are they being supported? And honestly, it really makes me kind of sad that this position never existed before the pandemic, because it's clear that we all need somebody like this to help people during this time. No one expected this to happen. And by no one, I mean, there were people who did, but no one prepared us for it. And so what does that mean for artists? You know, we're calling ourselves the gathering economy. We bring people together. And so when that becomes dangerous, how do you pivot? And I think that's been a lot of my work as well, helping and figuring out what that means to pivot your programming, what kind of support systems are people looking for. You know, we've been doing some different kinds of calls where we'll have different organizations share how they've been pivoting their work during this time and what their plans are so that people can learn from each other. And I think one thing we've learned a lot is before COVID, most arts and culture organizations kind of worked on their own and didn't come together because they didn't have to, or they didn't feel like they had to, I should say. But now that we all cannot create, we all are struggling to figure out how to make a profit, how to keep the lights on, how to keep people getting paid. There's this been really great bittersweet part of us having to work together more and having to understand how each of our work is different but similar and what we need when things like this happen.
Yeah, so true. I really think more places need to incorporate this type of role. Is this one of the first types of roles like this, or is this? Do you have any information of
There is a woman in, I think it's Detroit or Michigan. I can't remember. I'm really bad at geography. Who is an she does something very similar. She does arts emergency there. And she's a consultant. So what she does primarily is natural disasters or things that happen that people aren't planning for. So she's been doing this work for a while, I think about 10 years. But she primarily works in the Michigan, Detroit area. So that's someone I've been looking towards. But from what I know, and it's possible I don't know if there is anyone, but it's not something that we see a lot of. I think people have never thought of this being something that's a necessity within the arts. I know it wasn't something I ever was taught about, which is sad, because natural disasters happen all the time. I think of, I grew up in Florida and hurricanes would happen every year. So what happens when a cultural institution is hit by a hurricane? Or when a city is devastated by another natural disaster, how do the artists and the arts and cultural organizations survive? What are the resources they have? I think, a lot of people have been under the assumption that people have endowments, they have other partnerships. So there's no point to think about that. But what happens when the endowments are themselves in trouble too?
Right.
So I think this could be an opportunity for more of this work to happen, or at least for more people to invest in wanting this kind of work in other cities. So I'm hopeful that people will see it as something that's necessary for every city that has a pretty big arts hub.
Wow.
Well, this is like the first time I'm hearing of a city or a community creating space to respond to what is happening here. And so like my mindset up until meeting you, Pascale, has been like, we're just sort of floating around, doing the best that we can, and a lot of people working very hard to figure out what they can do and how they can help other organizations and vice versa. But this is, it's hope. It's at the same time, it's hopeful, but it's also like a little terrifying that it's only happening in one city, and it's a city that is hours away from me.
Right. And it's not a city like, I think there may be like, I think there's an organization in New York City that's doing some of this work, but it's not like focused specifically on it. So it just makes me think about like the bigger metropolitan areas that have such a higher concentration of arts, right? Like I'm thinking LA, New York City, Philadelphia, Chicago, like what is happening with those artists and those institutions? And I know some of us have the ability and the luxury sometimes to be able to travel for art. And so that affects us too. That affects the work we're able to get, the work we're hoping we could possibly be looked at for, and I think that's something I've been trying to look at more, is how different cities are responding and different institutions are responding to this moment. What are they thinking are the ways that they can come back, and how they can make, things stronger and more sustainable, so that if, and I'm knocking on wood, we are to go through another pandemic or even the second wave, what does that mean for us? Like we just work very differently, and we have to have people in our pocket to understand that, so they can advocate for us correctly, so that we're able to get what we need when this is over.
Right. And I think that also touches on our third T of honesty, because in order for a city, state, whatever it is that wants to implement something like this, they have to be honest with themselves and say, hey, our community is hurting. We have artists who are also hurting, but who kind of, one of their jobs is to help bring people together, help tell stories, right? So if they're honest and say, we need these people, because a lot of times they're like, oh, arts it's like secondary, right? It's like the secondary thing. But really, honestly, it's one of the first.
Yep.
People want to be entertained. They want to take their minds off of the things that are happening, right? So that, like I said, that leads us to our next topic of honesty, which is an adherence to the facts. Okay?
Yes.
Fairness and straightforwardness of conduct, or sincerity. And then there's also, a European herb that's also called honesty. And it's also an interesting fact. Honesty used to mean chastity. It's an obsolete term now. Yes.
Thank God.
Oh, I know. Who knew? Yeah. So I think with people being honest, companies being honest, that's part of what will change the culture, and help promote a cultural shift of owning up, being responsible, and being honest. Yeah. I mean, that's my opinion anyway.
Yeah.
It needs to happen. I think it's the time. People want transparency. They don't want to be left out in the dark. So just give it to them.
Exactly.
And it starts with these people that are in charge of these companies being honest with themselves too.
Yep.
And I think there's definitely a lot of blinders on around, you know, especially casting practices when we're talking about either casting people that are not white or people that are not cis. There's a lot of preconceived notions that people are not being honest about where their own biases are coming from.
Yep.
And then there are being roles taken from people or not people not even being considered.
Yep.
For these things.
Exactly. So with that, you know, we are all artists in our own right. So how do you think your work that's being put out shows your sense of honesty as being a director, as being a composer, songwriter? Do you think that you have any kind of responsibility with being honest to that material?
Oh yes, 100%. I know, and I had a conversation not too long ago with my friend Dane Figueroa Edidi, who you should look up if you're not familiar with her work. She is an amazing poet, theater maker, actor, all of the above. And we were talking about the show that I'm working on, and I was talking about how I'm struggling around some of these conversations that I'm trying to depict with that are coming from characters who are saying, you know, terrible things that I've heard cis men say that I don't even want to put to page. But it's like she said, you know, you can't be afraid of telling the truth. Because if you're not, if we're kind of sugarcoating the reality, people aren't gonna really understand the impact that and the reason that we and marginalized people as people in marginalized communities feel if we're telling this watered down version of, oh, he made a joke, he didn't think it was funny. Like that's not even skimming the surface of a lot of people's realities. So if we're not telling the truth about our experiences, you kind of just you can't be afraid who's gonna be pissed, who's gonna not like your work because they see themselves being called out.
Right.
So I do think it is our responsibility as creators to tell the truth about what we have seen. Otherwise, everything is. I mean, there's nothing wrong with like some reality shows and like the shows that are these comfort shows where you don't have to think too deeply. But if we are trying to make stuff at a societal change level, then we have to be honest about what society looks like. And so I think it's integral in all the work that I want to do and that I want to write.
Yes, I totally agree. I think, you know, for me it's my sense of responsibility is not different, but it changed with every role that I have. As a director, I think I always try my hardest to keep my room as open as possible so that actors are able to come to the table and come to me with any concerns, especially when we do work that is uncomfortable or work that kind of takes a lot of risk. I recently directed a production of We Are Proud to Present by Jackie Sybil's Drury. And the play is basically like part presentation, part Brechtian, where we break out and we try to explain to the audience about this moment in African history where this small colony was colonized by these Germans and what that meant for them. And we talk about this history. And there's a moment in the play where the playwright specifically says that it's like the last moment of the play, where the playwright specifically says the actor has a noose over their neck, and we're supposed to simulate that he's being hung. He is not supposed to be hung. It's supposed to look that way. And it's really to give the audience an opportunity to see that fine line between hate and love and how easy it is for people to go to hate and go that far. Because so many people are like, oh, that didn't happen. No, there is no way that people were lynched back then. That's not true. But I think when you see young people try to reckon with these moments, it gives it way more of an impact. And there was a lot of pushback about that moment. Like, do we do it? Do we not do it? And though it was hard for me to deal with that pushback, I knew it was important to have that image. And I knew it was important to check in with the actor and make sure that he was okay with it, that he felt comfortable with it. And of course, we had a fight specialist who was a part of the team to help us with stage combat as well as the specific moment. So always making sure that the team feels that they can have their voices heard and feel safe in the room. I think that's my responsibility of being honest with the piece. And then to be honest and to adhere to what the playwright wants. My job as a director is to make this show exact as I think the story is meant to be told. What are the emphases that this playwright or this storyteller wants the audience to leave with? And if this image is a part of that, then how do I make sure that my actors are safe and that we're still honestly telling the story? And I think that's a lot of my responsibility as a director. And in terms of casting and creating a team, I have to make sure that I'm bringing the right people to the table so that everyone feels safe, comfortable, and they can make the risks they need, and also have those hard conversations, because we have to have those hard conversations before we bring it to an audience. Like that, it starts there. And it's my responsibility as the director to make the room a safe place, safe and brave space, so that they can feel it and be able to go there. When I'm a dramaturg, it's a little bit different because my loyalty is to the playwright. My loyalty isn't to the director, it's the playwright. So if the director thinks that they want to do something, but the playwright wants to do something else, then I'm with the playwright full steam ahead. So that's that kind of honesty I have to have with playwrights. And that can be hard too, because, you know, as Will knows, like, this play is your baby. Like, you have taken a lot of time to care for it. Many drafts, many people have looked at it, many nights of thinking about it. But as a dramaturg, you want to see the best of this play. You're there to kind of, I don't want to say challenge, but be that other mouthpiece, so that when the playwright is able to bring it to different audiences, or even other dramaturgs, they have a perspective of what an audience may understand from the play. And that's the responsibility of the dramaturg. And that honesty is so important, because if there was I think there was certain moments, I actually got to dramaturg a little bit for Will's play, which is amazing. But I think there were some moments where I had to be a little honest with him about certain characters and, like, why this motive, why did you decide to put this character here and not there? And those are important conversations to have, so that the play can really find the parts that it needs and take away the parts that may be shielding it or covering the really important parts of it.
Wow.
I'm thinking about this, like, creating a safety for your room, for these people, that to foster these conversations and to create space for brave conversations to happen. And it's been coming up in conversations with a lot of other people in the past couple of weeks too, about creating a space for someone to say something that is a direct representation of where they are right now, and not reacting to that, to whatever their place is, through defensiveness. And fostering honesty, but also at the same time fostering a growth and an ability to see more things. And it's, the safety is so important to being honest. I mean, how honest can you be if you're feeling unsafe?
Right.
Wow, right.
I don't know where I'm going with this, but I just think it's important.
Well,
it's true.
I think that all of us as queer people have a certain experience with honesty as well. Finding your place in this world, and you have to first be honest with yourself before you can then be honest with everyone else. So experiencing honesty as, like, these two different ways, like inward and maybe more outward. So Yeah.
And if we're committing to being honest in ourselves, like to like fully realize honesty is to realize that everyone else is going to give what they can give in their honest way, unless they're being manipulative or like dirty. And to allow them to make that space and to allow them to express that, because that honesty needs to be expressed if it's ever going to develop into something else. Even
and I think the other thing is you should be able to receive it too. Like, let yourself be open to that, because I think that's what's really hard is to being honest is so difficult. And I love that you said Michael, how being queer in of itself means we have to be honest with who we are. Like that, it starts there. And I think that is that openness is so integral to making that all happen. Because if someone isn't open to your honesty, you're never going to want to be honest again. You're going to feel like you have to like have a facade, have this kind of way of being, because when you were vulnerable and honest, someone shut you down, someone dismissed you, they invalidated how you felt. And that inherently made you feel like, why should I be honest? And like, I think like give and take is so important in that too.
I totally agree. So for you as artists, or for, I guess, us as artists, to create space within the viewpoint of the artist to the audience, right? How important is it for us to have dialogue with the audience? And I guess vice versa, to have them engage with you as well.
Why you gotta ask all the hard questions?
Well, I stole that question from Michael, to be honest. But
I love it though. It's a good one. It's a good one. I feel so many ways about this. As someone who does a lot of talkbacks, sometimes I'm like so excited to have this conversation with audiences, and then they start, and I'm like, Jesus Christ,
right.
I wish this was over.
Because it's like a lot of like trying to re-educate.
Yeah. Re-educate, redirect, make people shut up, all those things. Yeah. And I think it's also like, what are people bringing with them to whatever our conversation is? But I know for me, like, that's my favorite part. Like, I want to talk to audiences. I want to hear what they're engaging with, what they're excited about, what they want to see more. So that's something like I have to, it tears me apart to have to deal with the other side of it, where sometimes you don't know what people are going to experience and what they're going to say. So you have to be okay with it going bad and good. But I think it's important, because that's who we need. We need the audience to be artists. Like without an audience, we are just, people doing our thing by ourselves, or some people say it's a hobby, right? It's not our artistry. Like an audience makes it that thing for us. But I like being able to talk to audiences and giving that space, because I think it's important to process and to have someone with you to process what that is. It's like for me, when I finish, I just finished watching the L Word Generation Q with Katie last week. And I was like, I need someone to talk to. Will, we should make this happen.
Text you right after.
Yes. Like, we see movies or we see TVs and we want to talk to other people about it, because all we want to do now is like, we've taken all this in. Tell me what you think. Was it what you thought? Did you see that? Like, let's talk about it. So I think like that's the great part about whatever we do as artists. It creates conversations. So it's inherent in how we have to engage with them and what that means for how those dialogues go. And I think they can be really helpful. And I've seen people use them in ways that are a part of the art, right? That you may see people do post-show talkbacks that are during the intermission, or it's a part of the play. So how are we changing that that way of doing it is also interesting to see it now, or I guess then and now.
Right.
Wow. I do wonder if like talkbacks are the most effective when we're asking what is the best way to engage people in conversation.
It isn't.
I know that I tend to get better feedback and better conversation when it is a one-on-one thing, like after a show, be it like a showcase of a musical theater thing or like just a solo gig. Talking to people after sometimes is equally fun and engaging as the performance, but it is really hard to do in this huge setting where half the time you just got the person putting their hand up who wants to share a fun fact about themselves,
Right.
which they've connected somehow. And there's something in there that would be worth discussing, but then it's taking everybody else's time to have this kind of side discussion that totally missed the point of the show or, whatever. So I wonder maybe even in these post-COVID times, like if a shift to like digital conversation, I mean, this is like message board stuff how we like start fan groups online, like where another community comes from is these people discussing and maybe getting artists and creators more involved in these spaces digitally, because then you can take the time to have these side conversations with people who like maybe kind of missed it and need another redirecting, but not at the expense of the entire audience. And maybe peers can be doing that with each other, and it's not the onus of the director or the composer or the playwright again to be like, well, I just spent years doing this, but here you go is the distillation again of what you missed while watching.
Literally. Though my favorite is during talkbacks when people are like, did you really memorize all those lines? Was that a real kiss? Was that a real slap? When it's student matinees, I let it slide. But when it's actual adults, I'm like, come on, y'all. Like, it's theater. We got to do it. Like, did you see the scripts on stage? So I hear you, Will. That's when I'm like, is the post-show talkback the actual thing that we should be doing? I don't think so. I would love to see a whole new revamped way of engaging. I've seen a couple of companies do this new thing. I don't know if it's effective, where they've given like certain actors and certain people of the creative team like a phone number, and audience members can text them after the show like specific questions. And I'm like, that seems cool. I don't know if it works though. I think it was like one production I saw that did this, and like the numbers changed every week so that it wasn't the actual numbers of the artist. So it was like a number, like a Google number, I think, that you could text and they could answer these questions. So it was a really kind of like what Will was saying, this one-on-one engagement with the artist. So you have a different way. So I'm curious to see how people are going to really innovate it, because I think there needs to be a new kind of way that we can have conversations about art with audiences. Like even this platform is great, right? And I think podcasting is also going to be a big thing too. So I'm curious how we're going to really like embrace the virtual world as an opportunity to engage more or differently.
Right. Well, you brought up a good point about engaging differently and engaging virtually. While you were speaking, I was just thinking like, wouldn't it be amazing to have a little QR code on the back of the program to say like, oh, this is going to link you. You can upload like either a video or just a written question, and then possibly even get those individual questions answered back, kind of the same way with the way that is even more engaged and still able to be more separated.
I love that.
So you can take that and run to the bank.
Maybe you should take it and run to the bank. Let's get you on somebody's marketing team, because that's a great idea. Love that.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where we're going, especially for like because I've done a few like outreach things, and one specifically was going through all of New Mexico. We went through like 10 different cities in New Mexico, from south, north, east, west. And some of the places were really big places to perform, where the talkback was kind of like not necessarily the most effective, because it's like you can only pick on 3 people out of 300. And then some of them, there's like an audience of 30, and you can really have like an open dialogue in a way. And so I guess it also depends on the size of the audience, the community that you're in, what type of audience it is, because like you said, if you have an audience of students, it's going to be different than if you have an audience of, the typical show goer, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, these are all very interesting topics to think about. You know,
Yeah.
Zoom is also an interesting form. I know we're all a little zoomed out right now, but my mom is actually an actor in Connecticut, and she did a digital performance at one of the theaters she performs at, and they did a Zoom talk back with, and I think that was interesting because then it allows people who really want to have the discussion come in. And I also like that there's the chat feature, so people can ask questions without being the star of the show and be like,
it's
I have
amazing.
a personal anecdote that will take 10 minutes to tell that. And you can ask, and then the people leading the conversation can really, can skim over those questions and be like, thank you for your feedback, but not what we're going to spend everybody's time on. And then you can release the masses that don't really want to be in a talkback setting after a show. And then you can maybe pay people for their time to be hosting these discussions.
That'd be great.
Right?
Yes.
So I think that's another interesting element to consider for the future.
I love that. I've seen certain playwrights. I don't know if this is petty or not, but maybe it is. I've seen certain playwrights ask audience members to write down their questions before the talkback starts and give them to the moderator or the playwright, and they will decide which questions they will ask. So it's very similar. Of course, this was before COVID, but similar idea to what Will is saying. And I think, having that control is very important because, man, those anecdotes, I think people just like want to talk, which I get, they got to see people talk for 2.5 hours. So like, it's my turn. Like, not related, honey. No.
But now digitally, if people want to just keep talking and are fueled by the show, they can find other people to do that with without needing to tell every single person that was in the cast, how did you remember all those lines?
And a creative way to build a community.
Exactly.
Yes.
Your artistic intentions.
Yes.
That's perfect. Oh, I just love these talks. I think there's so much to be gained from just sitting, chatting, talking, asking questions that are multifaceted.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, it's great. It's great. Well, I think we're about wrapped up for today. Do any of you all have any last kind of questions or statements or anything that you want to discuss?
I would like to. Oh.
No, go. I had nothing.
No. Did we link this link in the comments? So today we would like any of our watchers to go to the comments where we have linked a link tree of the BTFA, the Black Trans Femme Artists, Femmes in the Arts. And through this link tree, you can find resources and a number of different ways to donate. So please do so. Help this organization. Help these people.
Like Pascale said, it's the money.
The
money does the talking and helps create the space.
It really does.
Yeah.
It really does. Well, we want to thank you for coming on today. And thank you so much for your beautiful and unique and so thoughtful interactions to our questions and interactions with us. It's really beautiful to have people on that have something to say. So we appreciate you.
Thank you both all so much. This was so great to be able to talk with amazing other artists and have open and honest conversation. Just like you said, that is where we started all. So I'm so glad to have done this. Thank you, Michael, for thinking of us. Like, I was so happy to see your email. So it's just, I can't wait to see the other stuff that you all do.
Well, thank you, Pascale, and thank you, Will. I mean, you both are brilliant, beautiful human beings, and you've given us and everyone watching so much to think about. So thank you. Thank you for sharing your thoughts.
Yes.
We're going to end today with another clip from our Songs of the Rainbow concert with Will singing. This is also from the regulars, correct?
Yes.
Learn to Trust. So thanks again, everyone, for watching. And Pascale and Will, if you don't mind just staying on for a couple minutes afterwards. Yeah. All right. Thanks, everyone.
I'll see you next Sunday.
Hey.
All right.
I did a fly on the wall, watching the world as it moves. I can keep the peace with anybody listening. But how many times can I explain? We're all gonna be by the same game, scared of the consequences, and I'm left with the fences around myself. And I learned to trust anyone else. Losing everyone I've ever tried to tell you. Did I make anyone else believe that I didn't come here to see? Maybe I could open up some eyes. If you knew the things I hear them say, you'd see why I hesitate. Make it out alive. Think I haven't spent my days fronting each condescending phrase, echoing down the street from the lips of men who didn't know my name. How can the world we live in grow? People around us never know more than the differences. So I tear down the walls around myself. Can you learn to trust anyone else? It's a big decision, but the story's yours to tell. Everything's true. You are much more than the eye can see. It's a strength if you believe. Maybe I can open up some minds. Explore the possibility to get the visibility. Gotta have a fight. Did I come here to hide? Would you be someone with the strength to change its minds?